At the G7 summit in France, one small moment said a lot. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump met after nearly 16 months, but this time there was no big public warmth, no dramatic hug, just a formal handshake. In diplomacy, gestures are never just gestures. A handshake can show respect, but the absence of warmth can also show distance. And that is why this Modi-Trump meeting matters. Because India and the US are not enemies. They are strategic partners. But right now, this strategic partnership is carrying pressure, trade tensions, defense delays, immigration worries, Trump's repeated claims on India-Pakistan de-escalation, and now the deaths of Indian sailors in US strikes near Oman. So the question is simple. Can Modi and Trump repair the trust deficit? I'm Lav Sharma and you are watching DNA in Focus. Today we decode why this Modi-Trump meeting is not just about one photo op, but about the future directions of India-US relations. In international politics, leaders often speak before they speak. Through body language, through seating arrangements, through smiles, through silence. At the G7 summit, Modi and Trump exchanged greetings and shook hands. But compared to the earlier Modi-Trump meetings, the moment looked restrained. That matters because for years, India-US ties were sold not only as strategic partnership but also as personal chemistry. Howdy Modi, Namaste Trump, big rallies, big optics, big friendship messaging. But diplomacy cannot run forever on optics. When interests clash, even warm chemistry gets tested. And this time, the background was not celebration, it was strain. India and the US still need each other. The US sees India as a major partner in Asia, especially when China's rise is changing the balance of power. India sees the US as important for technology, defense, trade, investment, and global influence. But over the past year, several issues have created friction. First, trade. Trump's tariff actions created pressure on Indian exports and made trade negotiations more difficult. Second, immigration. Washington's new immigration policy and higher H-1B visa fees affected Indian students, professionals, and workers. Third, Pakistan. Trump repeatedly claimed that he helped de-escalate India-Pakistan military tensions. India has consistently maintained that the ceasefire understanding happened through direct communication between India and Pakistan and not because of outside mediation. This is important because for New Delhi, Kashmir and India-Pakistan issues are not open for third-party political credit. That is a red line. Before meeting Trump, Modi spoke at the G7 outreach session. His message was not loud, but it was pointed. He said the world does not suffer from a shortage of resources. It suffers from a shortage of trust. That one phrase is important because it was not just a general global statement. It came at a moment when India-US ties themselves are dealing with trust issues. Think of it like this. Two countries can sign agreements. They can hold summits. They can issue joint statements. But if trust weakens, every decision becomes slower. Every deal needs extra caution. Every statement is read twice. That is the mood around this meeting. India is not walking away from the US. But India is also signaling that partnership cannot be one-sided. The most sensitive issue before the meeting is the death of Indian sailors. 3 Indian seafarers were killed in the US military strikes on commercial vessels near the Gulf of Oman. The US said the vessels were trying to violate its blockade of Iranian ports, but for India, the immediate issue was not only geopolitics, it was Indian lives. India called in a senior US diplomat and made it very clear that ships carrying Indian crew members cannot become targets in a military conflict. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar also raised the issue with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. At the G7, Modi spoke about the maritime safety. He said countries must ensure that sea routes remain secure and that seafarers can work without fear. This is where India's concern becomes clear. Indian workers are present across global shipping networks. They may work on foreign flagged vessels. They may sail in conflict zones, but when they die in military action, India cannot treat it as someone else's problem. So this meeting is also about a basic message. Strategic partnership cannot ignore the safety of Indian citizens. Now comes the biggest practical issue, trade. A proposed India-US trade deal is expected to be one of the main topics in Modi-Trump talks. For Trump, trade is always political. He likes clear wins, lower tariffs, better market access, visible deals, and for India, trade is more complicated. New Delhi wants access to the US market, but it also wants to protect farmers, small businesses, domestic manufacturing, and strategic sectors. So the real challenge is balance. The US wants India to open more. India wants the US to stop treating trade like pressure politics. This is why the trade deal matters. If both sides make progress, it can show that the relationship is stabilizing. If talks remain stuck, the trust deficit will continue. In simple words, trade is not just economics here, it is the scoreboard of the reset. India-US defense ties are still important. The two countries cooperate on military exercises, technology, maritime security, intelligence, and Indo-Pacific strategy. But even here, there are irritants. India wants reliable defense supply chains. It wants timely delivery, it wants technology transfer, and it wants defense cooperation that does not come with political unpredictability. One issue that has frustrated India is delays linked to engines for the Tejas fighter program. For India, this is not a small matter because defense deals are not like buying phones or cars. If a delivery is delayed, it affects military planning, production timelines, and national security. So when Modi and Trump discuss defense, the question is not only what new deal can be announced. The real question is, can the US become a more reliable defense partner for India? There is one reason both countries keep returning to each other despite tensions: China. For Washington, India is essential to any serious Indo-Pacific strategy. For India, the US is useful as China becomes the more assertive on borders, technology, trade, and maritime power. But India does not want to become a junior partner in an American strategy. That is the key difference. India wants strategic autonomy, it wants US cooperation but not US control. It wants to work with the West but also keep its own options open. That is why India buys Russian oil when it suits national interest. That is why India talks to the US, Russia, Europe, Gulf countries, and global South partners at the same time. This is not confusion. This is India's foreign policy style. Multi-alignment, or in simple words, India wants friends, not handlers. This Modi-Trump meeting may not produce a dramatic announcement. It may not solve every issue, but it matters because both sides need to show that the relationship is not breaking. For Trump, a stable India relationship helps his global image. It shows he can manage a major Asian partner. For Modi, the meeting is about protecting India's interests without turning the relationship into a public fight. That is why the tone will be important. If both leaders show warmth, markets and diplomats will read it as a reset. If the meeting looks cold, it may confirm that the strain is deeper. But the real result will not be measured only by photos. It will be measured by what happens next. Does the trade deal move forward? Does the US address India's concern on maritime strikes? Does defense cooperation get more predictable? Does Trump stop publicly claiming credit on India-Pakistan issues? And does India feel respected as an equal partner? So can Modi and Trump reset India-US relations? Maybe. But this is not the old Modi-Trump phase. That phase was built on spectacle. This phase will be built on negotiation. The hugs may be fewer, the smiles may be controlled, but the stakes are bigger. Trade, defense, China, energy security, immigration, Indian lives at sea, and the question of trust. India and the US are too important to each other to walk away. But they are also too complex to pretend everything is normal. That is the real story. This meeting is not about whether Modi and Trump are friends. It is about whether India and the US can rebuild trust when national interests, political pressure, and red lines are all on the table.